Today, we're going to be looking at every single NFL team's 2024 draft class, giving our grades and thoughts, as well as looking into their fits right now and into each team's future plans in today's episode of the Home Field Advantage. Welcome back to the Home Field Advantage. As always, I am your host, Brett Holmes. Thank you so much for joining us once again here on Spotify. And if you notice something new in the description, if you go to the profile, there's a YouTube link. And if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome to the first ever videoed episode of the Home Field Advantage. If you scroll through this profile a little bit, you'll see an older podcast that I used to do with one of my buddies who I would love to have on an episode in the future. Hopefully stay tuned for that. But now with me doing this on Riverside, I'm able to put a little bit more production quality into this thing and, start editing and putting it out on YouTube and hopefully grow on both platforms and just kind of expand the outreach that this podcast can have, because I really enjoy doing these episodes for y'all, and y'all have showed great support for this on Spotify, so might as well go back to YouTube, where I used to be my old stomping grounds, but now I'm just trying to kind of take back over both of them. And, I don't really have the audience to do that yet, but hopefully I have the heart and the courage to do that with, just like some of these talents. Hopefully they have the heart and courage to prove me wrong or prove me right. Like I said in the intro, we're going to be going through all 32 teams' NFL draft classes, giving my grades, and this was a very entertaining draft class. So before we get started into everything, now that I'm on YouTube, I missed saying this, but if you're on YouTube, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, hit the notification bell, like, share, get this podcast out there. I want to get this channel back up and going. And if you're listening on Spotify, do what y'all have already been doing. Love the support, and love making these things for y'all, especially when I've got as entertaining content to look at like this year's NFL draft. So let's get right into it. Starting off with the Arizona Cardinals, I'm going to give them a B for their 2024 draft class. And everyone knows that Marvin Harrison Jr. is a home run pick. There's not much to talk about there that hasn't already been talked about. The one thing I will say is the more and more that I look at this situation, don't be surprised if Marvin Harrison Jr. starts off slow like Justin Jefferson did in his rookie year and then explodes. But he's such a good talent. I just don't see how this doesn't work out, especially, and not only just for Marvin Harrison Jr., but for Kyler Murray. I've been one of Kyler's bigger supporters, at least amongst the people that I know. I love the game that Kyler Murray plays, especially from a fantasy aspect, which when that time of year comes around, trust me, we will be talking about all sorts of fantasy-related news. And Marvin Harrison Jr. to Kyler Murray is going to be one of the most sought out duos, at least at the back end of the year. I don't know how many people are willing to buy into a rookie and a quarterback with an injury history, but I'm buying into Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr., as well as Trey Benson. Trey Benson is going to eat in this offense. I love the fit here for what they need. They need a good, elusive back who can confidently take the reps off of James Conner. And James Conner has been a pretty good receiving back in his own right, but he's definitely more of a power back. But with Trey Benson, I think he doesn't have bad three-down back potential. A lot of people didn't see him as high because they saw him as a receiving back. I don't think so. I think Trey Benson's got great three-down back potential. My problems with this draft class start to go into the second and third rounds outside of Trey Benson and as well into the fourth. I think Max Melton, Tip Ryman, and Elijah Jones were all heavy reaches for Arizona Cardinals. I would have loved to see them go corner where they went Darius Robinson. Now, Darius Robinson is a very safe pick. I said he was a first-round quality talent, but that was me expecting some of these guys to be off the board. I was shocked when I saw Arizona not picking up Nate Wiggins there at the back end of the first round, but only time will tell. I think Darius Robinson is a good player to have in there to kind of start this uprise for this Cardinals defense. And I'm assuming that Jonathan Gannon has got his stuff straight and he knows who are his favorite guys in this draft class. He looked like a good coach last year with the cards that he was dealt, even though the Cardinals didn't have a great season. Dan Campbell didn't have a great season in his first season. And, now we're looking at him as one of the better head coaches in the league. So I think Gannon has built a pretty well fit draft class for what he's wanting to craft this team's identity around. And so that's why I'm not going to go too low, even though I think some of them are reaches. I'm going to sit here and go with a B because there are some really good upside picks in this class. The same cannot be said for the Atlanta Falcons. If Penix ends up being your QB1 in the future, cool. It won't be for another 2 years because you are guaranteeing Kirk Cousins $90 million this year and you draft a quarterback in the first round. I get drafting a guy that can learn behind Kirk. It makes sense. And this is a very talented offense to learn behind. Penix is not a guy to learn behind. Penix is a guy that a lot of people thought were going to compete for a spot as a starter this year. J.J. McCarthy was probably a more ideal fit for what you want to get out of Michael Penix Jr., and he's a better prospect than Michael Penix Jr. because he doesn't have the injury history and he doesn't have the age. I love Penix as a prospect. He is a phenomenal athlete, and he's one of the better, if not the best arm in this draft class. But it is just a horrid fit in Atlanta. And I really don't like the pick going Rook or Hiroho over Johnny Newton. I thought when they traded up, that was Johnny Newton written all over it. And then they went Rook. Look, Rook is a really good run-stopping defensive tackle, but he was not one of the better players available on the board. You could have stayed at your pick and gotten Rook. I mean, just like the Titans could have stayed at their pick and gotten Devondre Sweat. We will talk about that later. But just a very questionable move. I will say I really do like the pick of the third round, getting Braylon Trice. I think he has an Arnold Ebiketie type of fit here with that team, just starting to slowly earn his reps. And overall, I think they had some good picks. There were some picks in here that looks like they can pan out, but it's a very developmental draft class. And even then, I just don't even think they got the best pieces for this to develop. I do like the Rook fit. I don't like the pick over Johnny Newton. And like I said, I do like Braylon Trice, but overall, very mediocre day 2 and day 3. I'm going to give the Falcons a C-. I mean, they easily had the worst draft out of anybody here. Moving on to the Ravens, who had one of the best drafts out of anybody here. I'm going to give them my first A+. Some people have been going A-. I'm going to give them an A+ because they had an insane day 3 on top of a very, very good valued pick at 30, getting Nate Wiggins. Nate Wiggins was one of my favorite corners available. And I think if Nate Wiggins wasn't as slim as he was, he'd be going towards the top of the draft because his instincts are phenomenal. His ability to hawk the ball are phenomenal. He is probably the best man corner in this entire class. And some people may disagree with that, but when you look at the tape that he put on for Clemson, he looked like one of the, if not the best man corner in this entire class. And this is a very talented draft class. I love the Nate Wiggins fit there alongside Marlon Humphrey and with Kyle Hamilton back there as their main safety. Dude, they've got a phenomenal secondary. Hats off to the Ravens. Day 2 was a little bit underwhelming, but Adisa Isaac can make some noise. I thought you don't have terrible value getting Isaac there. You know, some people have Isaac ranked as a high, round 2 prospect. Some people had him ranked as a round 3 prospect. I get making sure to get a little bit of edge help, and they were starting to go off the board there. But they had an insane day 3, like I mentioned earlier. Des Walker is a guy that has just been completely shadowed by the amazing talent that is in this class, but he cooked at UNC. Don't get it wrong. He had a bad pro day, and I believe he also had a terrible Senior Bowl. I think his pro day was a little bit better than his Senior Bowl, but overall, he just didn't test very well, and it brought down his draft stock. But I still like him a lot. I still like Des Walker, especially the fit that he has here in Baltimore. And Rasheen Ali and TJ Tampa, phenomenal fits, phenomenal picks. TJ Tampa was probably one of the bigger steals in the whole class just because a lot of people weren't really banking on what they saw on tape, but he is the ideal build for what you want a young corner to be. And you've already got Nate Wiggins as your main cornerback too. So for him to learn behind Marlon Humphrey and have that competition with Nate Wiggins at CB2, it's a fantastic environment for him to go in. I love so much about this Ravens class. It's really hard not to. I'm going to go with an A+ here for the Ravens. With the Bills, I'm going to go a little bit lower, but I still do like their class. Keon Coleman can eat with Josh Allen, and Keon Coleman's gotten a lot of positive press, so maybe that's, foretelling something very positive for Keon Coleman going forward. But he's the main guy in Buffalo. They don't really have much of anything there anymore. And I do like the player that Keon Coleman was. Obviously, I had Keon Coleman going all the way down in the 40s, where Dallas picked in the second round, not the third round. But I do like the fit there. He's a very interesting prospect. His 40 time does not tell how fast he actually is. He plays a lot faster than he ran on that 40-yard dash. I will say, with when you start to look into the second and third round picks here for the Bills, Bishop is good. Cole Bishop is good, but there was better players available in my opinion. I like the fit that Jaden Hicks had for them a lot better. So overall, I think I'm going to give the Bills a B. I think they had some solid fits in round 3 and 5. I think Cedric Van Pran-Granger, longest name in this whole class, can be a steal. He played very solid at UGA and can be a very solid center for them going forward. Not a lot of flashy picks here. They definitely did have a lot of depth in rounds 3 through 5. But not a lot jumped out to me. It just felt like they were kind of filling in the holes that they lost in free agency with some more developmental guys. I don't expect them to be super competitive in that division. I would expect them to still be a decent team because Josh Allen is their main guy. But the Bills are definitely going to have to work a lot, and I think they should have worked a lot harder in this draft class than what they originally ended up with. So I'm going to end up giving the Bills a B here. With the Panthers, I'm going to go lower with a B minus. Look, I like Leggett. He's a dog, but he's one of the older receivers in this class. And I think with what you're looking at, typically with the receivers that fit the profile that Leggett has, they're not first-round guys, and they don't end up transferring to the league as well. But I still have faith that Leggett can be a dog. I still have faith that he can be a dog, even though his pro comp is a receiver that they already have on the team with Jonathan Mingo. I've got confidence that Leggett can at least make some noise because he's a very, very intriguing athlete. And the same thing can be said for Jonathan Brooks. But that was a shocker. I mean, Jonathan Brooks to the Cowboys seemed like the most obvious thing, but we had different intentions in mind, obviously, not really moving up at all in this draft class. But Jonathan Brooks, I think, is a good fit. I'm not sure if they needed to trade up for him, not necessarily from a value standpoint, but is that the pick that you need to make? I think the Panthers would have been better off sticking it where they got and getting a guy like the Cowboys got with Marshawn Kneeland. I think you really needed an edge to replace what you had in Brian Burns, and you just used it to move up and go get a running back. So it's a very interesting pick with Jonathan Brooks, but we'll see how that pans out. I do love the Trevin Wallace and Jatavion Sanders pick. I love Jatavion Sanders a lot as a tight end prospect. I don't know how he fell to the top of the 4th round. That was criminal to me. They're both a little bit raw at the pro level, but they have very high ceilings. I think if Trevin Wallace can hit his ceiling, he's already one of the more athletic linebackers in this class out of Kentucky. And Kentucky has been known to produce some of these more raw prospects. So if Trevin Wallace can be worked into this defense very well, and that coaching staff can do their thing with Jatavion Sanders, I think it can end up being 2 really good late round steals for them. But only time will tell. I think they kind of fell off after that. Leggett and Brooks aren't the greatest starts to your draft class. I think that's why I'm going to give the Panthers a B minus. Although Wallace and Sanders, they have very high upside. They won't contribute much this year, though, in my opinion. With the Bears, it's hard to mess this one up when you're at 1 and you're at 9. I'm going to give them another A plus. Look, this is the best draft I've seen the Bears have ever since I started paying attention to the draft, or really ever since I paid attention to the NFL. I mean, Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze are phenomenal players. And having them as your duo for the future is magic. Kieran Amandaji, I know he's a project, but the sky's the limit with a guy that has shown the flashes that he has. Coming out of Yale, he's not faced a lot of talent, but if he can be adjusted to the league, I mean, you've got your OT for the future. You've got a really good starting offensive tackle going into the next few seasons, pretty much all the way until Caleb and Odunze's rookie contracts are up. And having that extra depth on your team really helps when you're trying to build a contender, but then already have a roster that could contend for at least a deep playoff run in the NFC if Caleb hits his ceiling this year. Not ceiling overall, but just ceiling for what he can do this year. If he can have a CJ Stroud type of season. Only time will tell. obviously, especially with Kieran, but if they hit the ceiling with all of these players, and you could say this for a lot of other draft classes, but it's very likely that they hit the ceiling with at least two of these players, with Caleb and Rome Odunze. They didn't have a lot of value, but they knocked it out of the park. Kudos to the Chicago Bears. Phenomenal offseason you've had so far, even though I still question the Justin Fields trade now that you've got this draft class out the way and you've built the roster that you have. Caleb's got the best starting situation that a rookie quarterback has ever had, and don't be surprised if he starts putting up crazy numbers, but hats off to the Bears, give you an A-plus draft. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to give the Bengals a B here. I think Amarius Mims is a phenomenal pick. He's going to be Burrow's bodyguard for the future. And I think Chris Jenkins is a perfect replacement for DJ Reader. But I do question why you didn't move up and at least get a tight end at all. I don't think Mike Gesicki is really the answer there. And I was shocked to see them not go to Tavion Sanders in the second or third. However, I will say, I think Jermaine Burton is a good fit for what you're missing in Tyler Boyd now that he is off the team. McKinley Jackson in the fourth, I think, is an impressive athlete, but he definitely does need some work to his game. There's a little bit of development that needs to go on here, obviously, with Mims and McKinley Jackson. I think they're the big developmental guys. Burton and Chris Jenkins are the more day one guys. Not too much jumps out at you just because they didn't fill all the needs that I expected them or saw that they needed to fill. I also would have loved to see the Bengals go with another running back later on in the day that could at least compete with Zach Moss and make that running back room a little bit more interesting. But I don't hate the Bengals draft. I'm going to give them a B here. With the Browns, it's a very unimpressive draft. They had one of the poorer drafts in the entire class, and I think going into it with the volume that you had doesn't really help. But there's teams that went into this year with very poor volume and still managed to hit it out the park. The Browns did not. And I think I'd be shocked if anyone outside of Zach Center had a day one impact. I think Michael Hall II is a fine pick, but not a phenomenal pick. And I just think there are better players left on the board. In multiple different rounds, you could have said that for the Browns. I'm going to give them a C. There's not really much to even talk about with this draft class just because it's a lot of fits that just don't really feel like they were needed or they don't really feel like they will fit for this team. Now, I'm going to have a good amount of notes about this because the next one we have is the Dallas Cowboys. Now, our RB1 right now is Ezekiel Elliott. And safe to say I did not think that was going to be the case because of all the talks we had about how much we love Jonathan Brooks. Oh, my God, Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas. He's our guy. I don't know if that was some sort of smokescreen. I'm not going to call Jerry a genius for it, but I will call him a genius for trading back at 24 and getting the pick that you did in the third round because easily my favorite pick from this was Cooper Beebe out of Kansas State. Guy's a dog. And he can move around. He's got good size. Yeah, sure. His agility isn't the greatest. And his arm length is what some people don't like. But, I mean, Cooper Beebe is so smart. He's so instinctive. And he just mauls people, man. I love the Beebe pick. I think it was a great fit. Alongside Tyler Guyton, I think Tyler Guyton is a very good pick. He's got monsters upside. But he's extremely raw as a professional offensive tackle. But I think moving him over to left tackle alongside Tyler Smith will help him out a little bit and help him feel a little bit more comfortable knowing that he's got an all-pro next to him. This team's been very good with developing raw prospects. Tyler Smith was a raw prospect coming out of college, and he looked really good day one. So we'll see what they can do with Guyton over the offseason, see what he looks like at the beginning of the year. But sky's the limit for Guyton. It really is. It just depends if he can, bet on his own pick. But I will say one pick that I hate to hate, and I say it like that because I really do like Marshawn Kneeland as a prospect, but I just don't think he'll get the amount of time that he deserves this year or in the next couple of years. And I say that because what have we seen from Sam Williams? And if you don't know who Sam Williams is, it's a shame because, dude, if you're a Cowboys fan, Sam, when he gets the playing time, shows up. he is not a bad player at all. And I was expecting him to be kind of handed the keys with Micah moving in and off the line, sometimes dropping back as an off-ball linebacker. I was expecting Sam Williams to get the keys as, the secondary edge, but it looks like Marshawn Nealon's going to be thrown in there to kind of compete with that, which I can't argue against competition, but I really want Nealon to succeed, and I really do love the fit that Nealon could have once DeMarcus Lawrence is gone, because I think DeMarcus Lawrence only has 1 year left on his deal, and he might not be a Cowboy for much longer. Unfortunately, that would suck. Hopefully he just retires and just stays a Cowboy for the rest of his life. Tank is royalty around here, and I think the build that Nealon has is very similar to Tank. So if that ends up panning out, phenomenal. We got DeMarcus Lawrence too. I will say Leafau was definitely a little too high, especially for my taste, but he fits what Mike Zimmer likes to see out of his linebackers, and I think when you look at the motor that he plays with, you do see a little bit of Eric Kendricks in his game. I think the only thing you really do need to make sure you watch out for is just improving his coverage instincts. Like Tyler Guyton, he's a little bit more raw. There's a lot of work that you got to do here, and it is a little too high. I think they could have gone running back here, but I'm going to trust Zimmer. He's really one of the things that I think he's shined at is developing linebackers very well. When he was in Minnesota, he had Anthony Barr, who he developed and kind of fit into his team very well. And then he developed Eric Kendricks, who was very, very good at his peak. And now that he has Eric Kendricks in there, I think he can be a really good teacher to Leafau. And the final pick that I want to go over is Kalen Carson. I think Kalen Carson is a good value. Oh, what am I thinking? I'm not going to glaze over this just because I've already looked at his tape. Ryan Flournoy, I am very intrigued in Ryan Flournoy. As an athlete, he was one of the best ones at the class. In the class that was at the combine. I mean, he showed out the combine, and that just tells you how much I glazed over him. That's my bad. Ryan Flournoy is probably going to be a training camp hero. He's probably going to be a guy that shows out in preseason. I'm hoping that he ends up competing because he's got the tools to. He's got a little work to do, obviously adjusting to the league. But there's some good picks here. There's some really good picks here. There's some really good fits, and there's some really interesting developmental picks here. I think this is a class that is really, really hell-bent on only time will tell, and I think that is the definition of this year's draft for the Cowboys. It is not an all-in draft. You straight up lied once again. I never want to hear those words come out of your mouth, old man. But I will say, there are some picks that you did cook with here, and I do like them trading back into the first round and getting an extra pick on day 2 and getting Cooper Beebe. I'm going to give the Cowboys a B. This has the potential to be an A, maybe even an A+ if they hit their potential. But I think overall, as of right now, if we're talking about all-in aspects, this is a B class for the Dallas Cowboys. But I'm very, very, very intrigued to see what some of these guys can develop into. Moving on to the Broncos, you kind of got back into a hole in the first round. There was a massive run on quarterbacks. I don't even think the Broncos expected to happen. But, Nick's too high for my liking, but after that Penix pick, I mean, everyone saw Knicks going at 12. I think he could have traded back into the first, or traded back into the, or traded up into the second, since you weren't really in the second at the first place, and address some bigger needs. I think what you got down the line in Troy Franklin and Jonah Ellis, they're great fits. And Franklin may explode early if Bo Nix is your QB1, or just in general, because he is an explosive athlete. And I think Jonah Ellis was at good value. But I would have loved to see them go up and get a little bit more, because their team still needs a little bit more. I think they could have gotten a better corner out of this draft class, because it was a very talented corner class. I think they would have benefited from getting a safety, because they don't have Justin Simmons anymore. And I think having another guy in that room, again, Jaden Hicks, who continued to fall, would have been a really good fit here. Just overall, not a bad class. I just felt like they left too much on the table for my liking, and I think that definitely does hurt the value of their draft class. I think if they would have been able to trade back and still get Knicks, this class would have been a B, because they did have a really good start with the third and fourth rounds. I just think that Knicks pick in a situation that they've put themselves in has hurt them a little bit too much, and that can really define all of Broncos offseason. I'm going to give the Broncos a B- for this class. Now, moving on to the Lions. I said the Lions previously. That's my bad. But moving on to the Lions now with their draft class. Chef's kiss chef's kiss to the Lions for giving us Cooper Beebe. Thank you. But also chef's kiss for getting your cornerbacks for the future. I'm going to give the Lions an A. I'm going to go ahead and get it out the way. I love Terrion Arnold. I love Ines Rakestraw. Their fits are phenomenal for what Detroit needs out of a corner. They need physical, explosive corners, and they've got a physical one in Ines Rakestraw and an explosive one in Terrion Arnold. This could quickly develop into one of the better cornerback tandems in the entire league because you've also got a phenomenal free safety, slot corner, kind of hybrid player, with who you got in last year's draft. And oh my God, I cannot even remember his name. And he was one of my favorite players out of that draft class too. And I can't even think of his name. Oh, this is going to annoy me. I got to get this out the way now. Brian Branch. Oh my God, I almost called him Brian Burns. That would have been so disrespectful. But I'm so sorry, Brian Branch. You are a dog. I'm sorry for forgetting your name. But they've also got Carlton Davis on their roster now. So for Ines Rakestraw to learn behind him, I don't think there's much learning that Terrion Arnold's going to do. I think he's just going to be kind of thrown in there as the main guy. But especially along some of the instincts that Brian Branch carries. And Brian Branch played like a vet in his first year. Back-to-back years getting steals in the second round with Branch, and then this year getting Ines Rakestraw Jr. I think they got some, pretty good fits down the board as well. In the sixth round, Mekhi Wingo and Christian Mahogany, phenomenal sixth-round picks. I love the Lions and what they've done with this draft class. I think all the picks fit their culture very well. Like I said, giving them an A for this one. The Packers, I'm going to give them a B+. I think they filled all the needs, or pretty much any need that they had left, because they didn't have a lot with how good they performed. I think they could have waited on Morgan a little bit and gone with an elite complementary cornerback with Jair. Obviously, I'm talking about Nate Wiggins, but that's pretty much going to be my main complaint for a lot of these teams that could have used a corner and passed up on him. But I do love the picks that they made down the board. Javon Bullard is probably the best coverage safety in this class, and Edgar and James is the best linebacker in this class, hands down for me. I think they really did kind of show out all of their power in the first couple of rounds, but after round 3, I will say this is where their class got hurt. I think with the start that they had, they were looking towards the A trajectory. But I think after that, they were just looking at guys that I think they valued the highest out of any other teams. And I think when you go with that instead of going BPA, for some picks, it does hurt your class a little bit. But those first 3 picks were really good. Like, I'm not going to hate on Jordan Morgan. He's a really good project guy. I feel like he's a little bit more of a project. Not as big of a project as Tyler Guyton, but there was a little work to do with him. He just doesn't really jump out at you all that much. But Bullard and Edgar and James, they do. I love those picks, and that's why I think the Packers earned a B+ there. With the Texans, this might be unpopular, but their draft underwhelmed me a lot. And I think because of that, I'm going to go with a B-. I think they had decent day 2 volume, and I just think they didn't do too much with it. I think them getting Fisher and Cade Stover didn't make too much sense, at least where they were drafted, because especially with Cade Stover, you don't need Cade Stover. You don't need him. There was guys on the boards that you could have used. I will say, I do think them going out and getting Callum Bullock out of USC, I think that was a really good fit. But once again, Jaden Hicks would have made this a much better class. I will say the one pick that I do love is Kamari Lassiter. Kamari Lassiter was one of my favorite day 2 guys available even before the draft started. Kamari Lassiter was one of my favorite day 2 guys. I believe I had Detroit picking him up at the beginning of the second round. So I think the Texans got good value there getting Kamari Lassiter. I think he has big-time upside as a CB2. I don't know, as a main corner. That's why I like the fit that he has over there with Houston. But overall, it just was very hit and miss for me out of Houston. So I'm going to give them a B- for this class. It's not a bad class. They've got good fits, but I just think they overshot some picks. With the Colts, I'm going to give them an A-. Look, they did a great job with their first 2 picks. Adonai Mitchell and Leatu Latu made this draft an A all by itself. Now, after that, they built through the trenches with all the volume that they got. I think Anthony Gold could be a nice rotational slot guy for them. But I think the only two picks that we're really worried about here is Adonai Mitchell and Leatu Latu, and for very good reasons. They are two studs. The story and the build that Leatu Latu have fits the build of the next superstar. And I wanted this fit to be the Los Angeles Rams so bad because he just felt like the perfect guy to take in, not only as a player, but as a character to take over for what Aaron Donald was leaving out of that organization. But I think the Colts are getting a phenomenal player in Leatu Latu, and I think they're getting a great receiver to complement Michael Pittman Jr. with Adonai Mitchell. He should have been available. I keep on see that's one of the things that I've always hated about Adonai. I always mix it up. Every time I do something that's revolving around the draft, I'll go Adonai, Adonai. Hopefully, I don't do that in the regular season because there's no reason to disrespect his name when he's a player that good. I loved it when Adonai, I think Adonai is how you say it. I loved it when Adonai was over at UGA and it kind of ate up for them. I don't know if I've mentioned this before. I've probably said this every time that I've mentioned the Bulldogs, but I'm a Bulldogs fan, and I hated losing Adonai, but he was a great player. He showed up at the big spots, and I think that was one of the main criticisms out of Texas was that he did disappear, and Worthy was a little bit more reliable. That's why he went higher, but he shouldn't have fallen that far. And I think getting Latu and AD was phenomenal from the Colts. I'm going to give them an A- for that. Jaguars, I think this is another very run-of-the-mill class for them. Mason Smith was the one that really jumped out as, like, really? Like, that high? He seemed more like a round 3, round 4 talent, but they got him in the 6th. I mean, not in the 6th, Jesus. They got him in the 2nd, but it's a need. It's a need that they fulfilled. And the same thing with Brian Thomas Jr. It's a good fit. It's a need that you fulfilled. But I would have liked to go on, I would have liked to see them go a little bit heavy on corner. You were in a really good position to get a good corner or a good safety since you don't really have a solidified good safety. And why not have 3 good safeties? I've seen it work in Dallas, and it can work for other teams. But I will say the cornerback prospect that they did come out of this class with is Jarrian Jones. And I think Jarrian Jones is a very skilled athlete, but when it comes to coverage, I think he's a little bit of a project. But the Jaguars had some pretty good picks here. I will say the 3 picks from LSU was kind of questionable for me because out of all the picks that they did make, Brian Thomas Jr. was the only one that I really loved. And I think Mason Smith could be good, but he doesn't really jump out to me. Jarrian Jones is a guy that I think that has the biggest upside. Of course, Brian Thomas Jr. probably has bigger upside when you're looking at the talent that he is, but compared to where you're getting him, Jarrian Jones has really good upside and could be a guy like, what did we see a couple of seasons from Tariq Woolen? We saw a guy that was very talented athletically. He tested very well. He was graded well in college, but he just fell down low because I don't know, because scouts didn't like him that much. I loved Tariq Woolen coming out of college. He was a guy that I thought was like a round 3. I mean, could sneak into the late round 2, and he fell deep into that draft class. And I think about the same thing with Jarrian Jones. This is a guy that I've liked ever since I saw him perform well at his pro day. So there's some good picks here for the Jaguars. I'm going to give them a B. For the Chiefs, they almost got an A+. I think it's just because they didn't have as much volume and couldn't go up into the draft and get better guys. But they did the best with what they had here. I'm going to give the Chiefs an A, though. Xavier Worthy, I don't think was the best receiver or best player available, but it makes so much sense for what they don't have. And they don't have a guy that can be as good as Tyreek Hill. Look, Marquise Brown's fast, but he's never going to be as good as Tyreek Hill. Xavier Worthy is the fastest receiver that has ever come out of the combine. That's potential to have that Tyreek Hill level impact. Of course, Tyreek Hill's a little bit stockier now. He's got a little bit better hands. His route running's better, but Xavier Worthy still got really, really good routes. I really like the fit that Xavier Worthy have, just as well as the fit that Kingsley Suamataia has. I was shocked to see the Chiefs trade up to get Kingsley Suamataia, but hats off. You did a phenomenal job trading up, and I think they developed. Well pretty recently with their second day picks, more specifically their second round picks. And Suamataia, it just seems like another guy that they can build on in the inside, and then once he's needed as an offensive tackle, move him back out. I love the Suamataia pick. I think they got an absolute steal in Jaden Hicks. This is the guy that is going to be the closest to giving them the production that that Honey Badger did. And I think even though, once again, and this has been, a theme for some of the best drafts this year, you didn't have a lot of volume, but you didn't overthink it, and you got the best players available, and they all just so happened to be great fits for what you needed. Worthy, Suamataia, Jaden Hicks, those three guys alone give the Chiefs an A in this draft class. Phenomenal year. Kansas City, phenomenal year in this year's draft. And I like the Chargers draft as well. I think a lot of people questioned, how good this draft would be after they didn't go wide receiver. But Joe Alt is likely the best player day one in this draft class. He's an offensive tackle out of Notre Dame. I mean, you see Notre Dame in offensive linemen, you don't really need to think about anything else. I like this draft more than most people because they said they were going to build through the trenches, and they did, but they still went out there and got really good picks at the places that they needed to bulk up at. I love the Junior Colson pick. I don't know how he got into the third round, but I love that pick for them. They need a stud linebacker, and I think Colson can quickly become a stud linebacker, staying with the same coach that he had over in Michigan. Harbaugh knocked it out the park as well with Ladd McConkey, of course, as a Georgia guy. I loved when Ladd stepped up in the moments that we needed, not just him, but just a receiver to step up. He's a very reliable guy. I think he's a guy that will be able, if Quentin Johnston can live up to his potential, God, he has so much of it. And if he just plays any better, an inch better, he can light it up. I still have faith in his athletic capabilities. Hopefully, Quentin Johnston can be unlocked by Jim Harbaugh. I highly doubt it. But even if, Ladd McConkey isn't just the guy to, work over the middle of the field, he can get open and he will show an ability to be a very effective weapon. I think he will shine in the red zone next year. So McConkey is actually one of my favorite guys for fantasy, a little sneak peek into that. But I like the fit there, getting Herbert as his quarterback, as well as Cam Hart and Brendan Rice as their big day 3 picks. Of course, some people weren't high on Brendan Rice. I wasn't necessarily super high on him, but I had like an early day 3 grade on him. I don't know how he got into the 7th. So hats off to the Chargers. I think they can get a guy who's not only just a pretty good athlete and who had a decent college career, but a guy who's hungry, a guy who wants to work. And I think that fits in for what Harbaugh wants. And I think Cam Hart has got a lot of good traits to develop into something good. There are some draft picks in this class that are definitely heavy on the development, but I think that's what the Chargers need right now. And I like a lot of the fits here. So some of these fits are some of the better fits in the entire draft class for these players. So I'm going to go with an A- here for the Los Angeles Chargers. With the Rams, I'm going to hand out back-to-back A-, and I think that's 3 grades that have been in the A's so far in a row. But the Rams had another amazing draft. If we're talking about drafts that fill every need that they have, Rams probably did it better than anybody else. I would have loved to see them go after Spencer Rattler. I thought with Rattler falling, I was like, oh my God, they're going to get him in the 5th or they're going to get him in the 4th. I was a little bit surprised, but who cares about that when you've got the guys that you got in the 1st and 2nd? Hats off getting Braden Fiske and Jared Verse. I thought if you weren't going to go Leatu at 19, you had to go some sort of edge rusher. And what do you know? Jared Verse was available. He's probably the best power rusher in this whole class. Verse is going to make a very, very good impact for this defense, but also on the league. I wouldn't be surprised if Verse is really, really high up with a Defensive Rookie of the Year odds early on in this year, barring some sort of freak injury. I love the fit that Fisk and Hurt and Verse has over there. But I think they also got really good value picks in the 3rd with Blake Corum and Cameron Kinchins. I think they're just missing a guy with a high motor in their secondary, and I think Cameron Kinchins brings that. And, being able to kind of lengthen the longevity of what you can get out of Kyron Williams and having a guy like Blake Corum that can fit into multiple different situations, I thought was a very smart pick. I think the Rams, with the talent that they already have and the talent that they brought in through the draft, and also dude, if Cameron Kinchens can be really good this year, and we've got Cam and Cam with Cameron Curl as the opposite safety, Rams can make the division very, very interesting next year. Love this class here from the Rams at an A-. With the Raiders, Las Vegas Raiders, I love their first 2 rounds. I think it wasn't a need, but he was the best player available in Brock Bowers. And as an other guy, I love Brock. As a football guy, I love Brock. He does everything well that you would want in a player. And if JPJ can stay healthy, I know the medicals weren't great for him. But if he can stay healthy, obviously he's going to be one of the bigger steals in this whole class. I think in the third, they definitely did fumble with picking up Delmar Glaze, and I think I think they could have done a little bit better with the fourth, even though I think they got decent value with the Cameron Richardson out of Mississippi State in the fourth. I think he can compete. I think I would have rather seen them go corner in the third rather than wait for Richardson to fall. I mean, it wasn't even really that good of a fall, but it was decent value in the fourth. I'm going to go B+ here for the Raiders just because I love their first 2 picks. I like that Bowers pick a lot more than some of these other analysts that have gone out here and put it out there, but I think Bowers pretty much fits into all offenses in this league, and giving Gardner Minshew, if they trade for a quarterback, I highly doubt it. But Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, whoever's their main quarterback for the majority of the year, giving him Devontae Adams, which I mean could be a question mark, even though there hasn't been much talk. But I mean they don't have a quarterback, so it could be a question mark for him. But Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers alongside Devontae Adams, it's a really, really good core to have. And I think the Raiders hit it out the park with the Bowers pick. I was really happy with that. And that's part of the reason why I gave them a B+ here. With the Dolphins, they had a very annoying draft as a Cowboys fan. I thought if there was any guy that I would have loved to see us go, if we were going to go edge, Chop was one of those guys. And they got Chop Robinson, who gives them much needed depth. I was kind of shocked during draft night because of the offensive linemen that were on the board and the corners that were on the board too. But with the major injuries that they just had to their edges, he's a guy that can fit into their system very well, even when they're on the field. But with Bradley Chubb likely going to miss some games at the beginning of the season, Chop Robinson has a very good chance to prove why he needs to be on this roster's long-term plans and short-term plans. Patrick Paul is a very raw prospect, but he's a lot like Tyler Guyton. Dude is a mountain, and the upside, I think, was worth the risk for where they ended up getting him. My thing, man, why did you have to go Jalen Wright, bro? Like, I hate it. I hate it so much, but I don't hate it for Miami. I think it's a great pick for them, but why, bro? He was Jalen Wright was this close to being a Cowboy. It was a very annoying draft, but for the Dolphins, it was annoying for all the good reasons. I'm going to give the Dolphins a B here. And going back-to-back Bs here with the Minnesota Vikings, JJ has been their guy for months, but they knocked out the park with the Dallas Turner pick. I think them trading up and getting their Danielle Hunter replacement going forward was a slam. Was a grand slam pick, not just a home run. It was a grand slam pick. Dallas Turner to the Vikings, one of my favorite fits in the entire draft. And I also, I don't hate the pick. I think he's a good sneaky cornerback prospect, but Kyrie Jackson as your main answer to your biggest concern, in my opinion, what was their biggest concern, at least last year, because they had Kirk Cousins at least. But Kyrie Jackson can be great, but I don't see him as a CB1 type of guy. That could, backfire on me. They could develop him well. But I think the big part of this draft was Dallas Turner and JJ. And JJ is going into an offensive system that is very, very quarterback friendly. I think they did the best with what they got because they needed to sacrifice some capital to move up and get those 2 guys in the first round. But obviously sacrificing that volume down the line and not really doing too much with what you already had left is going to hurt their score a little bit. So I'm going to give them a B, but don't take it as an offense. I mean, Vikings still had a pretty good draft. Patriots, haven't given one out in a while, but I'm going to give an A+ to the Patriots. A lot of people think the Patriots had a little bit underwhelming draft. I think you're stupid. I think you're stupid if you think that because they got Drake May at 3. Look, Commanders, you love Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels has been your guy from the beginning, and I think Jaden Daniels is a better athlete than Drake May. I think Jaden Daniels might have a little bit more arm strength, if not equal arm strength to what Drake May has. But Drake May's potential is better than Jaden Daniels. I think Jaden Daniels is a better day 1 fit, maybe. But we said the same thing about Tua and Justin Herbert, and I see a lot of Drake May. I should say I see a lot of Justin Herbert and Drake May, but I see a lot of the same situation that Justin Herbert was with Drake May's situation here in the Patriots. And I say that because now they've got receivers that intrigue me. They've got some of the the speed guys. They've got some of the more physical guys in the past that just haven't panned out. But I love the receivers they went with this year. Javon Baker is a stud. He was a guy that everyone was predicting to be a big steal, and I think he can make some impact there, developing a connection with Drake May alongside Jalen Polk, who they got in the second. Polk is a stud. I really do. I really do like Polk a lot. I definitely like him a little bit more than Baker because he's the guy that has the potential to be your X receiver, and I think Javon Baker can definitely be your big play explosive guy like he was for UCF. I think they got decent O-line picks and the third and the fourth, and I think the value that you got with Jaheim Bell or Jaheim, however the hell you say his name, I think you got really good value with the tight end out of Florida State. I'm going to say Jaheim Bell in the seventh. Every pick just feels like they fit very well into their current and future plans. Hats off to Gerard Mayo for knocking it out of the park with your first draft. Patriots getting one of the only A-pluses in this year's draft. But I think when it's all said and done, it could be very likely that the Patriots have the best draft class overall. I love their draft a lot. I'm really banking on some of the upside with some of these players, but I just found it very impressive that they went out and got Polk and Baker. I think there's a really good fits for what they need for Drake May to succeed. Really interesting to see what the Patriots end up doing this year. Moving on to the Saints. I thought the Saints had a pretty good draft as well. I'm going to go with an A- here for them. Not as good as the Patriots, but I still do feel like they filled most of the needs that they have. And Fuaga can move all over the O-line. If they want him at tackle, if they want him at guard, it doesn't matter. He's going to eat either way. Talisi Fuaga, one of the safer picks in this entire draft. But I also thought Kool-Aid McKinstry was an easy first rounder just because of how safe of a cornerback prospect he was, in my opinion. And the same thing with Spencer Rattler. I thought Spencer Rattler, definitely not a first rounder, but I thought Spencer Rattler was an easy day two guy. And for him to fall all the way down to the fifth, and for what some people were saying, I think it was either Schefter or Rappaport that reported it, over a documentary from years ago when he was in high school. There's been so many reports saying that Spencer Rattler has improved from what that documentary. It was just laughable. Great value getting Kool-Aid McKinstry in the second and Spencer Rattler in the fifth. Rattler could make noise once Carr begins to get phased out of not only this offense but also the league. He doesn't have much left in the tank, but I think Rattler has a decent amount of what he can learn from Derek Carr, and it's great arm talent. He's close to an elite arm talent. It's just about adjusting to the game. But if he does, a lot of people think that Spencer Rattler could end up being, if there was any sort of chance of having a repeat of Dak Prescott, Spencer Rattler's him. And Rattler used to be an elite number one overall type of prospect before his character got in his way. And yes, Oklahoma Spencer Rattler was horrible, but South Carolina Spencer Rattler was really good and was actually really fun to watch. And another pick I do want to highlight before I get done with the Saints, Bub Means in the fifth. It's a good pick, but I think he could be a very sneaky day one a guy for them, because a lot of these big speed guys, they have some good value not only with their offense, but I wouldn't be surprised if they move Bub Means around in the backfield or if they use him as a returner. So don't be surprised if you see his name thrown around this year in fantasy. With the Giants, I'm going to give a B+. Neighbors is your guy. Not much to say that hasn't already been said with them. He should be a Giant for life. Newbin was a decent fit. I just wish they would have gone with a little bit more, athletic capabilities there. Like they're missing out on one with not having Xavier McKinney anymore. But Newbin's got really good instincts. I think Javon Bullard is the best coverage guy in the draft, but Tyler Newbin isn't far behind him. I think they would have benefited getting a longer cornerback in the third. I think Andrew Phillips is a good corner. I think it's a good pick in the third. And I'm not giving the Giants a bad grade at all. I just wish they would have gotten a guy that has a little bit more length, because I know Deonte Banks is good, and I think Andrew Phillips as a complementary corner is a good pick. I just don't see much of a size that a lot of teams really value when it comes to the cornerback room, but I'm not an NFL coach. What do I know? But I do think it was a very top-heavy class for them, but the top of their class was really good. I do still like the Giants class. It was, again, really hard for them to mess this up with the value that they had in this draft class. But, I mean, Malik Neighbors alone, that's probably about the only pick you need to really go right for this to be successful. B-plus here for the New York Giants. The New York Jets going over to the other New York team, still in the same stadium. I'm going to give them a little bit worse of a grade, but not too much worse. I'm going to give them a B here. I think Olufashanu is Rodgers' new bodyguard, and you needed one. I mean, he lasted 4 plays. Hopefully he can last 5 this year. But Olufashanu had a really good end to what was looking like what could have been a very shaky campaign last year, but Fashanu finished out really strong. I think Malachi Corley could be very productive for them year one, but long term, I think Malachi Corley will be productive for them as a secondary guy. They've already got their big, go and get it receivers with Mike Williams on a 1-year deal. Not that big of an impact, but obviously their big guy and Garrett Wilson. Everyone knows his name, but Malachi Corley will be a name that a lot of people will get to know just because everyone's called him Debo Light, and I think it's a very intriguing fit in New York. My only question with this class is why go so many running backs, right? One, what do you have against the Dallas Cowboys? That was really mean. You picked Isaiah Davis right before us, and I would have really liked seeing Isaiah Davis there. So I'm not over that. That really did annoy me. But I was also really annoyed that you went with Braylon Allen because I would have loved to see him with the star, but it's fine. It's fine. We ended up having a better class than you bums anyways. Jordan Travis was a good backup pickup, though. I think he's going to be a better backup than most people would expect. I think them going with running back a little bit too much hurt them a little bit, so suck it, New York. That's why you don't take our running backs. Even though I gave them the same grade as Dallas. I'm pretty sure Dallas got a B2. I do like Dallas's draft class a little bit better. But they still got really good talent here with Olufashanu and Malachi Corley. I don't know why I'm picking a fight with the Jets. They're not even in the same conference as us. Moving on to a team that I absolutely despise for reasons like this. I hate the Philadelphia Eagles and how good Howie Roseman is as a GM and how good their ownership is and how good their team is. Because they did it again. They had a great round 1. They did all this other stuff. But I'm not going to give the Eagles an A+. And this might be hater stuff. You might call me a hater. I don't care. I'm going to give the Eagles an A- for this one. Oh, no. I don't give you an A+. I'm not writing you like all the other outlets. Go away. Go away. I don't care. I love DeJean as a fit. I love him as a prospect. He's a great guy. Right? And Kenyon Mitchell, I ain't got to talk about that much. I'm not enough that he fell that far. I had him going as high as 11, and you got him in the 20s. So good job. But I think you should have went linebacker. I think you should have went linebacker a lot earlier than what you ended up doing because, I mean, your linebacker core still sucks. I mean, look, I like Nakobe Dean. Love my Bulldogs, but, I mean, come on. Trotter isn't – he's not really much in coverage. I mean, he never was really that good of a coverage guy. And I guess Nakobe Dean is your coverage guy, but he's smaller. And I also think if you want anybody to cover the middle of the field, you've got good safeties. I'll give it to you. You've got great safeties. And with Cooper DeJean as a corner or a safety, moving somebody in and out the slot, I don't care. You've got guys that can help out your linebackers. But if they ever do need to cover, it's going to be free yardage because your linebacker core is still horrendous. And I think that's the main reason I am giving the Eagles an A- just because I think they did go with the usual flashy things that they usually do in the draft and just, BPA every single pick. But I think this was one of those draft classes where they needed to realize, hey, BPA isn't what we always need. And they really did need a linebacker. Trotter doesn't fit their needs. None of their linebackers are proven in coverage. And I think Nakobe Dean can be good in coverage, but like I said, none of them are proven right now. I also would have gone wide receiver in the edge. Over an edge in the third. I think it would be nice to have a guy coming out the slot that you could rely on because, if Devontae Parker ever plans on getting in on the field, he's not coming out the slot, is he? And why move Devonta Smith into the slot? He's great on the outside. So there were some missed opportunities for them. Great talent, obviously, but they still have a glaring hole at linebacker, and I think they would have benefited from getting a third wide receiver. I think because of that, That's why I go with an A-. But boo-hoo, cry. You still got in the A's. You still have one of the better draft classes. So if you're upset about that, shoot. Anyways, let's go on to the Steelers, a team that I don't hate as much as Philly. But I mean, I don't like them, but it is kind of annoying to see them have as good a draft class as they did, because they did really annoy me with some of their picks. Why did you have to take Troy Fautanu? You could have gone Tyler Guyton. You could have gone Tyler Guyton, and we could have gotten Troy Fautanu. But Fautanu is an ideal fit. Fautanu is a lot like Fuaga. He can move all around for them. I love that pick for them, and a very strong class overall. Zach Frazier is a guy who pretty much helped solidify their offensive line for the next few years on the interior. And Roman Wilson was a very, very good value pick and a very good replacement for Deontay Johnson. I think they have a very similar build as a wide receiver. I don't think Roman Wilson's route running is as polished as Deontay Johnson's was, especially at that time in his career. He's always really been a polished route runner. I think there's a little bit of work that Roman Wilson has to do. That's why he fell out of the second. But I do still like Roman Wilson as a prospect. And I believe there were some mocks where I even had them going Roman Wilson as their wide receiver. So, I mean, I've definitely mocked it on my own before. I don't know if I put it out on one of these. I put out 3. 2 of them were round 2 guys. So who knows? But it's a fit that I wouldn't have been surprised if it happened, and it was a really good one. Obviously, the fall that everyone's talking about is Peyton Wilson, the most athletic linebacker. A lot of people saw him as the best linebacker prospect. I saw Edgar and James as the better guy. He will be productive. Trust me. He will be a good linebacker. The question is just, when is he going to be on the field? And I think that's the main thing that a lot of teams looked at. And I think that's something that you're going to have to continue to look at. But you got great value. You got a phenomenal class here. Steelers getting an A. Moving on to the back end of some of these draft classes, we're going with the Seahawks getting a B. I think they had great 2 first picks with Byron Murphy and Christian Haynes. Every pick after that didn't really wow me, though. I will say I think they kind of fit in the same boat as where they left a little bit on the board. I think they could have gotten a better tight end than A.J. Barner. But Byron Murphy is a stud. He's a guy that is going to eat up blocks, and I think he has a potential and is one of the safer picks. If a rookie were to be able to make a Pro Bowl, I wouldn't be surprised if Byron Murphy would be able to do that. Because he's a stud. And Christian Haynes is also a really good player. I think they got really good value there in the first 2 picks. It's just everything after that wasn't really great value. I think they were kind of borderline mid with their draft class, but I think getting talents like Murphy, at the top of the first, and then Haynes toward. Well, I mean, I guess it really wasn't at the top of the first, but like in the middle of the first, Byron Murphy kind of built that draft class's stock for me. I'm gonna go with the B. With the Niners, I'm going to also go with a B here. Look, Ricky Pearsall is a good fit. It is a good fit. But it's an interesting decision why you got him, at where you got him. I think you had some picks that were sensible at where they were. I think Renardo Green was good value. I think he can be developed into a good complementary piece. I think Dominic Punai, his flexibility makes this pick a lot more sensible. But I don't know. Does that mean Ayuk's on the way out? Probably not. Does that mean Debo's on the way out? Probably not as well. I just don't see both of them or either of them leaving at this point, because I think it would have happened before the draft. So still going with a wide receiver is a little bit concerning if I was a Niners fan about how confident they are long-term to get this contract done. But, just looking at it from a draft class point of view, I think Jacob Cowing and Isaac Guerendo, I'm sorry if I butchered that dude, but he's an explosive player. They're both explosive players, and I think it fits well with what Shanahan likes to see out of some of their gadget guys. There's just some interesting value picks here, which is why I'm going to go with a B. With the Bucs, I think the Bucs have one of the more underrated classes in the entire draft. I think Graham Barton is an amazing fit. I think he was one of the better picks in the first round. I also think Chris Braswell was good value in the back of the second. and he kind of fits in with what you need, and that's just a reliable edge rusher. I don't think he has that high upside, but I think Braswell can definitely be a good contributor. I think Tyke Smith out of Georgia was a little high, but he's tested well. And I think, once again, you're going to end up getting guys that can come in here and bring competitiveness to this room on defense and even on offense. Look, Jalen McMillan and Bucky Irving were fantastic values and fits for what Tampa needs going forward, because you're trying to think of stuff after Mike Evans. Chris Godwin's probably never going to be the wide receiver one that you hoped him to be. So after Chris Godwin, you're looking for guys that can step up. And McMillan was a really good complimentary piece. I don't think he'll be a wide receiver one potential, but I think he could be a good guy going forward in the rotation for the Bucs. And I think Bucky Irving could compete with Rachaad White. I don't think Rachaad White is a phenomenal pure rusher. I think he's a really good fantasy guy, but I think he's going to suffer from a little bit of the same problems that Austin Eckler did last year with seeing his averages go down. So I think that's why bringing in Bucky Irving was great value for them. My one gripe about this is that I would have loved to see them go cornerback within the first 4 rounds, but they hit very well on most of their picks. And I think for that reason, I'm going to go with an A for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans, one of the worst draft classes here, but they still got some pretty good value later on, surprisingly. But they had a very underwhelming start. I think they settled with most of their top picks, and that's why I'm going to give them a B-. Look, J.C. Latham is a good player. He's a good fit. He's not a top 10 pick. You could have traded back and gotten a little bit more volume in day 2. I mean, with how high you were picking, you could have even tried to find somebody to, jump one of these teams that was getting a quarterback, that was getting a wide receiver, that was getting Brock Bowers. You could have found a team that wanted that pick. And I don't know. I was just kind of disappointed to see them settle with J.C. Latham there. And then the massive reach on T'Vondre Sweat hurts most of this draft stock. And I think hurts his draft stock too. Because now, all of a sudden, this is a guy that I don't even think was a second-round guy to begin with. And at the top of the second, I mean, you're saying with that pick that at the top of the second, you felt like he was a first-round guy? No. I mean, I like T'Vondre Sweat, but not that much. I think they redeemed it with good value on Cedric Gray in the 4th. And I think overall, they didn't have a lot of volume to redeem some of those early settlements, and especially that massive reach on Sweat. And I think because of that, the Titans, they just really underwhelmed me here. So I'm going to give them a B- for them. The Commanders, a lot of people love this Commanders draft, but I think if you say the Commanders won the draft, you're stupid. I think if you say they won the draft, you're stupid. And this could be a very heated argument. If people want to get into it, fine, go ahead. Get into it in the comments below or in the Q&A below if you're on Spotify. But with the Commanders, I'm going to give them a B+. I don't think they reached A right there. I think they started off on fire, and I'm kind of shocked that they didn't have a better class than what I guess I anticipated them to, get an A+ because of all the picks that they had. But they started off on fire. Obviously, you get your guy in the future with Jaden Daniels. I think Drake May is better. Whoop-de-doo. Who cares about that? You still got a quarterback of the future. And Johnny Newton was fantastic value. And Mike Sanders-Still is a really good fit. But with Sanders-Still, there was a better corner for what you need on the board. There just were better corners on the board. And with Johnny Newton, I think who we got in the second with Marshawn Nealon was going to be the guy right there. I thought, I was like, okay, so the Commanders are trading up. Ooh, who are they going to get? I think there's some corners that could go. But when I was looking at it, I was like, dang, this could be Marshawn Nealon. I was like, and that'd be a great pick for them because I think Nealon was a guy that was like Darius Robinson that could sneak into the first. And a lot of teams were talking about picking Marshawn Nealon up in the first. And I think Nealon would have been a great fit. I think it would have been a better fit than Johnny Newton here because they've already got 2 stud defensive tackles in Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. Now, obviously, I understand Jonathan Allen's older and you're probably not going to pay him for too much longer. But, I mean, the Commanders need to do something and do something quick. And I don't know. I don't want to hate and sound like a hater because Johnny Newton is a good player and he probably will be very, impactful for you. But I think you just could have gone with a better fit there. I think they did the same thing that the Eagles did and kind of went BPA instead of going with a better fit. But then when you look at the Sanders-Still pick, that wasn't BPA. And then you look at Ben Sinnott, who is a good tight end, But where they got him in the second, I don't know if I would have done that. And then Luke McCaffrey was a massive reach. I think if anyone's like, well, he's McCaffrey, brother. Dude, come on. Really? You had Troy Franklin on the board, and you went Luke McCaffrey over him? BS. I don't think there's a single fan out there that looked at that and was like, yay, we got the best guy on the board. It's kind of coping there, in my opinion. But I think Shenault and McCaffrey are good fits. I think they can be impactful. I just think you got a little bit of a reach. I like the Brandon Coleman pick, though. I do think that they did a good job with that on day 2, or I should say, in the later rounds in general. But I think they didn't address their biggest need outside of QB with an offensive tackle. And I think because of that, you didn't address your biggest need outside of quarterback. And you could argue that offensive tackle is their biggest need with how horrible their offensive line was. You didn't address what is still your biggest need. You still have a relatively large need at edge, and you don't really have anybody that's proven going forward. And I was shocked to see that y'all didn't go out and get a really good safety, because I'm not trusting Jeremy Chin in coverage. He's more of a box safety. And, losing out on Cameron Curl sucked. And for them to not go out and get one of these safeties, especially with, come on, dude. You had so many good safeties on the board, and you went with Ben Sinnott? You had good safeties on the board, and you went with Luke McCaffrey. I think they had a very disappointing day 2 and day 3. Even with them starting off hot on day 2, I think they did disappoint me a little bit. So that's why I'm going to settle with a B+ with the Commanders. And just like that, we have run through every single team's draft class. Let me know down in the comments below, or in the Q&A or the poll, whatever I put up down below. Let me know your thoughts on the draft. I want to say, if you're on Spotify, I know what I'm going to put down in the Q&A. Who do you think was the biggest steal in this draft class? It could be from your team. It could be from another team. Let me know. And if you're on YouTube, let me know any of your comments on the draft down below. But just like that, we've already kicked out the NFL draft. Rookie minicamp is coming up. But the next few episodes, oh yeah, they're going to be all about the NBA. The playoffs have been hot this year, and there's plenty of stuff to talk about. And it won't just be me talking about it, but y'all will have to stay tuned for them. Another thought on the NFL, I will be doing off-season grades after some more free agency moves are made. There are some really good free agents that are left on the board still, and I do want to see how this free agency class rounds off first. That probably won't be coming out for another couple of weeks. So, like I said, I plan on focusing on NBA content until that runs dry. After that, who knows? Maybe we'll start talking about baseball. I haven't talked about baseball yet, or we might just take a little break and get back with the NFL. But now with me doing this on YouTube, I do want to get more people on this podcast. I do want to get more topics going with this podcast. There's just so much that I do want to do with this, and it wouldn't all be possible without the support that you guys have shown it. So thank you so much for watching this podcast overall, and thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you go over to YouTube, like it, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and share the episode on Spotify, just like y'all have continued doing. Phenomenal support so far with what I've been able to put out, and I'm just getting started. I really am just getting started with what I want to do with this. Really excited to go forward, but only time will tell. I'll see y'all then. Peace.